Hey guys, this is the Rubin Report. I am the now Ebola-free Dave Rubin, and I've got Felicia Michaels and Molly Swenson with me, and we've got a ton of stories, so let's get right to it. You probably saw this already. There is a crazy viral video of a girl hitting a guy and then a guy hitting a girl on the New York City subway, the F train. I've been on that F train, and let's take a look.
You got a bum-ass A-boy jacket that came out in 1990. Bro,
Damn!
You got a fucking big-ass fur hat. Oh, that's Nike Boob. That's this one. Just get your money up. Simple. Like, I'm done. I'm just done. Get your money up. All right? Done. All right? You want to know what kind of shoes I got on? I got Steve Adams on.
Don't nobody want Steve Adams no more.
What the? Why you stood just like bitch? I'm on shoes. You can see me.
My bad,
Man, you see me with that fucking phone. What is you talking about?
damn, you petty as hell. You can't even afford this phone. Nobody watching you. What you doing that for? I don't talk when you get mad.
You sound stupid.
Fucking dirty bitch.
You know me?
Oh!
Oh shit!
Oh shit! Oh shit!
So the guy and two others were charged with misdemeanor assault after that, and the girl was charged with felony assault for using a weapon, her shoe, in the attack. So, all right, guy should not hit girl. Do I have to add more to that?
Well, I just showed my son that video yesterday saying, look, you know, sometimes some women will go crazy on you, and no matter what happens, you can't hit a woman. So yeah, absolutely you can't hit a woman no matter what, even if the woman seems to deserve it, because you're the one that's going to get punished. And I'm glad to see that she got felony assault because she used her high heel on him.
Yeah, the high heel will hurt. Oh, he also was a lot bigger than her, right? So if he had been a little guy and then he hit her, that maybe I would feel slightly different, but the size of him alone, you can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are actually exceptions in the case where you can hit a woman. I mean, I think if you are under imminent threat, bodily threat, to a greater degree of just someone slapping you on the train, if I think you get yourself out of the situation as quickly as possible. If that means stepping aside, or if that means sort of backing off, or if that means shoving the person off of you physically, then you do it. But in this case, it didn't seem entirely warranted for him to slap her as hard as he did.
She was slapping at, look, it's not, a man should not hit a woman,
Yes.
but she was slapping the camera out of the guy's hand.
She was belligerent, no question about
yeah.
it. Completely belligerent. It was also 4 a.m. on Saturday morning. Guaranteed not a single person on that train was sober. And I think that, you know, you get riled up by the situation, and you could tell there were people fleeing and there were people running. There was like very fight or flight happening in that video from everyone on the train. And I just think that it made a lot of sense for all of them to get charged, and for her to be charged with a felony assault for the high heel. Those things are dangerous.
Is this just one of these things where we have to accept women get a longer leash? Because yes, we cut that video, we missed about 20 seconds up top. It's unclear to me whether he knew her or what started this whole thing exactly, but clearly we're all granting her a longer leash because she obviously was the instigator here. She hit first, and yet we're all sort of in agreement that he's sort of more wrong. It just doesn't even sound that right to me when I'm saying it.
I think women have to have a longer leash, just so, I just really think women have to have a longer leash so that that men can understand no matter what happens, you can't hit a woman. There's no other way around it, you know what I mean?
So what would you say then to all the men? Because I know the comment section's gonna light up and they're gonna say, these PC, blah, blah, blah. She hit him first, he has every right to do it, you can't hit anybody. So what would you say to those people? Because I know they're...
I would say if a woman is on the subway and she's humiliating you, she's probably wearing Jessica Simpson pumps and won't have a problem taking it off to beat your ass. But if you're in a nice place, a woman's probably wearing Alexander McQueen pumps, and she's probably not going to do that. You know what I mean?
So it depends on the pump.
Really. I think it depends on the high heel.
Because if we know anything, women love shoes.
Women love shoes, and if someone's wearing a fancy shoe, she's not going to beat on you with it.
Yeah.
But,
I think, like, yeah, fine, hit the woman, but now you have a misdemeanor assault charge on your record. If you just sort of sat down and didn't do anything or removed yourself from it, you wouldn't have that either. I think
so. Is that what he should have done? So again, we don't know the full context of this, but should she have hit him and then he should have just sort of sat there in it and just jumped off the subway at the next stop, would that have
assault charge? Then do it. But I think that most people looking back on that situation would have been like, I really didn't want an assault charge on my record, so maybe I would have done this differently. It's all sort of like a 20/20 hindsight thing.
So what do we say to girls, right? I'm guessing she's about college age. I mean, what do we say to them about, yes, there are repercussions, like...
I think that's right. In junior high, I think they should make girls watch that video and say, look, a man is not allowed to hit you, but you bear a responsibility on your actions as well. You know? And what is that man supposed to do? He's in a subway. He can't flee the scene, go to another car. That kind of chick is gonna follow him and still, because she feels it's power to humiliate a big guy like that. That's it's like a drug.
Yeah, well, she clearly was on a power trip there. I mean, just the way she was speaking to him, even the face she made right before she slapped him, like you could see she was like, now I'm having my moment.
Verbally abuse a big dude about his jacket when he's backed into a corner, sort of literally. maybe some common sense.
All right, so final thought on this. The other part of the video that I think is really interesting is all the taunting, the laughing, the cameraman that's basically doing play-by-play, the guy that jumps out right in front of the camera to smile and laugh. Like, what is it about humans that we really do love this shit? Like, even when I saw that video for the first time, you get like a weird rush from it. Like, are we just like we're just repressing all our violent craziness all the time that you see something like that and you're able to get it out?
I think you're absolutely right about we repress so much of what we want to do, and when we see other people behave like that, it makes us giddy, like, oh yeah, we can see how that goes down without having to participate in it. I do think people think that way.
Yeah, there's a weird duality for me because on the one hand, I get so awkward when there's confrontation and I just like, I seize up and I don't know what to do and I get really mad that it's even happening around me because of how bad I feel. But on the other hand, I have always really kind of wanted to know what it's like to just punch someone as hard as I possibly can, because I have dreams all the time where I'm like swinging and can't actually land a punch. I don't know if I'd actually be able to land a punch, and it's something I'd kind of like to figure out. Hopefully I don't, but like there's that.
Well, this is just the first segment we're doing here, so maybe you guys, I can.
Fisticuffs later.
Yeah, because girl-on-girl violence, everyone's okay with that. We know that much. Anyway, the moral of the story is don't ride the F train at 4 a.m. in New York City. All right, I don't know if you know this, but we are at war right now. First off, there's the Afghanistan war that everyone has forgot. We just signed some agreement that we're going to be in there for another like 12 years or something. But forget about that one. Then the Iraq war kind of ended, right? But now we're back in there and we're doing strikes on ISIS. And then we also jumped in on Syria, and now we're attacking ISIS in Syria. Of course, they're fighting Assad. We were going to bomb Assad a year ago. Remember that? Then we didn't do that. We kind of got the chemical weapons out. Anyway, it's a big clusterfuck, basically. And we haven't gotten war authorization on this, especially for the Syria part. There's some legal mumbo-jumbo that people are arguing, or at least the administration is arguing, that we have authorization in Iraq because we were there for a previous war. But we do not have congressional authorization for this war. And Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, wrote a piece in the Daily Beast about this. Let's take a look. He wrote, "I believe the president must come to Congress to begin a war. I also believe the War Powers Act is misunderstood. President Obama acted without true constitutional authority even before the 90 days expired, since we were not under attack at the time." And he went on to say, "But in either case, the war is now illegal. It must be declared and made valid, or it must be ended. Congress has a duty to act one way or another. Taking military action against ISIS is justified. The president acting without Congress is not." So what Rand Paul is referring to there is the authorization for use of military force, which was passed by the George W. Bush administration. And that's the authorization that Obama is using to get into this war. Now, before the election last week, for weeks, John Boehner kept saying, well, the president doesn't call us back to Washington to vote on the war, so there's really nothing we can do. Now, I'm pretty sure he doesn't like when the president asks him to do anything, so it's a little disingenuous. So I'm not cutting Congress slack, and I'm not cutting Obama slack, because I think we should, if we're going to have a war, which is a whole other topic, we should have authorization for the war. What do you think?
Well, is it technically a war, or is it a military action? What is it technically being referred to as?
So this is the legal, that's the legal mumbo jumbo that they do. And we went into Libya when Obama first got in, and they called it a kinetic military action or something. So there's ways to use words, but I'm pretty sure when bombs are dropping on cities and people and we're attacking terrorists or whatever, it's a war. If Canada bombed us, we'd call it a war, right?
Right.
I think, right?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, I think, first of all, I'm sort of tempted to discount almost any op-ed written by any presidential hopeful, or read between the lines at the very least. It's not surprising that Rand Paul, libertarian candidate, right? Yeah. It's all about, name recognition and sort of relevance at this point, which he's trying to maintain with this. And it's not a surprise that he, as libertarian candidate, isn't really a fan of unbridled executive power. So, no surprises there. I think that one of the more interesting questions raised, and he only does so indirectly, is this question of, can legislation or the legislative process ever catch up with technology and technological advances? Because, like you said, what does war mean? I mean, he invokes the Constitution. He invokes this this war bill from the 1970s. Yeah. Like, war has changed so dramatically. I mean, constitutionally, obviously, right? That was like muskets across a battlefield. But even since the 70s, there weren't drones. There weren't any of these things. So, like, yes, A, how do we define war versus military action? And B, like, how does that change whether or not the president can use these sorts of acts in order to defend the country the way he sees fit? Yeah. So all right. So to get to that point exactly, and what you're asking, so the president has 60 days. If it's considered urgent, the president has 60 days to get authorization, and then if there's no approval from Congress, he then has 30 days to end the mission. So what Rand Paul's arguing is we're past that point. So every time we've talked about this, and I've brought it up every time we talk about ISIS, I think part of the problem is people just don't care how the government works anymore. You know what I mean? Like, we created a system where we were supposed to have a legislative branch to write the laws, and then an executive branch to sign them into law, and a judicial branch to make sure that they're legal. And I just don't think anyone, including the people in those branches, I just don't think anyone cares. Is that fair to say? I don't think it's about that anyone doesn't care. I think it's like, what can we do? Yeah, you can go out and vote, which most liberals did not this past election cycle. So I don't think it is about we don't care. It's just what can we do to change it? There's nothing you can do or I can do to change what's going to go down at this point. And another thing I would like to add is Rand Paul is saying that this war is illegal, and isn't he a plagiarist? Isn't plagiarism
we both make mistakes.
Illegal? You know what I mean?
So that's the thing. Yeah, nobody's perfect, but I'm kind of with him on this. Like, I just think if we're going to do this, we could have a debate whether we should be doing it or whether the other countries there should be fighting ISIS, and we could sit back and they hate us whether we do it or not. But I think he's at least being intellectually honest here. Versus if this was a Republican president doing this, I'm pretty sure all the Democrats would be going nuts, right? If a Republican president was having a war without authorization, wouldn't Democrats be going nuts?
Yes, I mean, there's hypocrisy all over the place, and there's also like, you're both right. It's part of it is that we can't keep up with what the laws are and why, the 60 versus 90 days, like, why was that even put in place? Like, taking a step back and thinking about why these laws are even enacted in the first place is sort of more interesting than the nitty-gritty details of it. And figuring out, if that law is even relevant right now, because it was in 1973.
Exactly.
But is it relevant right now?
Exactly.
We don't. How are we supposed to know that? The president of all people should know whether that is relevant enough to pertain to this specific international security issue.
Right, and that's sort of what I'm saying. Like, I just don't think he cares. I think they have lawyers. They all have so many lawyers that they're just like, Obama's lawyers are like, yeah, you don't need to go to Congress. Go ahead. We got some legal mumbo jumbo from Bush in the 70s and blah, blah, blah. We'll do that. And Congress is like, oh, it gets us off the hook. We don't even have to vote on it, so then it's good for us. So it just goes to show how broken the system is, I suppose.
And that he can't even get the Republicans on board with it. Like, he is
they love war.
I know, on board with calling out Obama on it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he's straddling in the middle, which I find pretty...
Yeah, I worked in the White House for a little while, and I was sort of inclined to trust them. I mean, it's like the most passionate, intelligent, hardworking group of people I've ever been surrounded by in my life, and like, if they can't figure it out, then we're fucked.
Then we're seriously screwed. Right. Anyway, I don't know, call me a strict constitutionalist, or I want the system to work the way it's supposed to. I don't know. I've long thought that Satan's favorite drink is Monster Energy, and now I finally have someone backing me. Let's take a look.
Look at your M closely. There's a gap right here in the letter M. It's never connected. So you go into Hebrew. The letter Vav is also the number 6. Short top, long tail. Short top, long tail. You could have here in Hebrew 666 on the can. But my interest is the word monster. What do you see in the O? There's a cross.
Okay.
What has Christ got to do with an energy drink, let alone the name Monster? So I thought, well, maybe this is a Christian company then. BFC at the bottom of the can. Do you know what that stands for? That's the F word. Big can. In fact, they write it on the side of the can, so I know that's the F word.
Okay.
Now, do you know what a MILF is?
Yes.
That's on the box. MILFs, dig it, and you will too. This is not a Christian company at all. So why would they have put a cross on the can? Here is the message. Antichrist. 666 in Hebrew. Is there another agenda here? If God can use people and product, so can Satan.
Yeah, my mom, is she a real cut up or what? Oh, lordy, lordy. I do want to address one factual error that we know she made. It's important to note that the number of the beast is not 3 6s, but 666, as in 666, which would not be represented in Hebrew by 6 repeated 3 times. That's according to my notes right here, which were also written by the devil. Yeah, that's intense Hebrew school right there. Well, where should we start with this lady? She believes what she's saying. I admire people with convictions, you know.
The last time I saw a white woman talk about something short on top and long on the bottom was when they were making fun of someone's mullet. You know what I mean? Like, that's just so ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think the question that I'm wondering over here is, did you guys think that she knew or thought she was a MILF as she said that word? Is that why you think she knows what it means?
MILF, I tell you.
Yeah, she was like, a MILF, look right here. Okay, so
I'm crazy.
I know.
is there some part of you that kind of admires people that believe these things that much? Because beyond the crazy part, like there's obviously a crazy element to this, but there's another part of me that I watched someone that like put this all together, really thought this thing through, and it made sense to her, and she linked it all together, and like she figured it out in her own mind, and I sort of admire that, you know what I mean? There's something about conviction.
I'm curious, what was the first thing that drew her to it to even think that way? You know
She
what
probably
I mean?
was drinking a lot of Monster Energy, and
Yeah.
you start.
Moment.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say conviction so much as ignorance. I sometimes am a little bit. I admire a little bit just because, I think that being sort of hyper analytical to the extent that you can see all sides of it and not just the sides that you want to see, it makes for an unhappy existence for the most part. But like you can be so I guess it is conviction, so intensely believing of one particular thing that like everything else, there's so much confirmation bias, you don't even pay attention to anything else, that makes someone probably pretty happy and able to go through life just like, I've had it all figured out.
Like knowing their shit. So as we mock this woman, what if she's right and Monster is in on this? What if Monster...
Right.
You know, what if the joke is on us and Monster is Satan's drink and, you know.
The devil's product.
Yeah.
Well, she says something in there when I was reading it that this is the devil's product or Satan's product, and I was thinking, well, what's God's product? You know what I mean? Like,
God's
it's such a bizarre
is-
thing to say.
God's product, I guess, would be I drink that reverse osmosis water. Are you guys doing that?
No.
It's very pure and fresh, and you don't do that? We're in LA here. No one's doing
God's
that.
product, I don't know, I think it's like Tempur-Pedic, personally.
It's very fluffy, like a pillow, and God is in heaven, clouds, pillows.
Lube, that would be God's product.
One of the things that I do think is really, lube is God's product. Yeah, there you go.
It's gonna flow right past that.
I don't, okay, lube. One of the things that I think is kind of funny about this is that people always think, like, okay, that makes sense to her, right? This idea that Satan did this Monster Energy drink. But don't you think Satan has bigger fish to fry? Like, this reminds me of the other side of the coin when athletes always immediately thank God. They spend their whole lives training to be better, being the best they can. They work out all day long. They do everything they can to be better. And then the second something good happens, they thank God, even though they should be, it's the reward of their own work that they did. So it's sort of the same thing. Like, why would Satan, she's thanking Satan, but don't you think Satan is up to more devious stuff than energy drinks?
He likes to get on the ground level, I guess, with Monster drink. That's so ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, so this is Satan's grassroots stuff, like get everybody hopped up on caffeine, and then they start doing mischievous things.
Yeah. I mean, you'd think that she'd make that argument more easily about like pretty much any alcohol brand out there, pretty much any sort of illicit substance out there, which we'll talk about later, I know. But I mean, I don't know. A, I'm a Jew. B, I drink Red Bull, so I don't. It doesn't apply.
A Jew drinking Red Bull. This panel is over. Google is taking over Moffett Air Force Base. They are leasing it from NASA. That's right, for the next 60 years. There's Moffett Air Force Base right there. It looks like it's something out of Star Wars. That looks like a transporter leaving Hoth or something. As part of the lease, Google is going to take over the airfield, while the U.S. government is going to retain ownership of it. And it's a little curious, what is Google doing with an Air Force base? We've got a NASA statement. Once renovations are complete, Hangar 1 will again be home to high-tech innovation as Planetary Ventures begins using the historic facility for research, development, assembly, and testing in the areas of space exploration, aviation, rover robotics, and other emerging technologies. Hangars 2 and 3 will be used for similar purposes. Okay, so that's what NASA is saying about it. I thought the story was interesting because, you know, we've got Virgin Galactic. They actually had a pretty bad mishap about 2 weeks ago, but private companies getting involved in the space thing. So it's a little unclear as to what Google's going to do here, but between Virgin and Google doing this, you know, Apple's building that freaking, what is that thing, that octagon that I think is going to be a spaceship. And like, is Google building Elysium? That's pretty much my question. Like, are they building something there that's going to go out into space, and then the Earth is going to go to shit, and the Google employees and the Apple people, they're going to live up there, and we're going to be down here with the suckers?
Yes, probably.
Yes.
Probably.
Pretty much.
But if so many companies are getting into the space race, I mean, is that a safety issue as far as, you know, people doing whatever the fuck they want up in space?
Meaning that private companies doing it instead of government.
Yes, yeah, that's my concern.
Yeah. What do you think? Are you okay with this idea that private companies, we don't know exactly what they're doing here, which is why I'm interested in it.
Fully okay with it. I think this is great, especially with like cuts to funding for NASA. You know, them not having to do the operations for this means they get to actually spend more on R&D and space exploration and stuff like that. I'm pumped about private companies getting into the space race. I mean, that's like the only way we're going to get there and sort of figure it all out. I mean, it's like Google's building their own sort of Area 51, except we all know where it is. I mean, I'm hoping.
So do we need NASA anymore? Because it seems to me like during the Cold War, like we were in a space race, right? Russia wanted to get there, we wanted to get there, so it made us do it. And because we don't have that anymore, there just seems to be no, we're doing so. We don't even fly, you know, we haven't been to the moon. Do you know when the last time we've been to the moon?
30, 40 years
It's something
ago.
like
Did we go to the moon?
And did we go to the moon? Good question.
Yeah.
But it's something like 1971. It might be 1973. I might be off. But we haven't even been back to the moon. You know what I mean? And now they're saying, well, we got to get to Mars, so forget the moon, nothing there, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I'm kind of on board this idea that private companies can get us there. But so is NASA even, what's the point of NASA at this point if we can sort of farm this off to Google and to Virgin and the rest of them?
Well, I mean, I don't know if this makes sense, but the thought of when airplanes were first invented and people were making airplanes, but then you had the Air Force come in, it wasn't even the Air Force, but the military come in with, you know, better planes, and they went to war. If we're having private companies make these spaceships, I think the government has to have the ultimate version and an even better version than the private sector does. I do think that NASA does need to exist. I mean, I'm curious how much were they using that space? Were they using it at all? Was it just a waste of money? That makes sense that they should lease it.
So I'm sure
it was a waste of money.
There's no doubt about that.
And that's another thing. I mean, I think that, like my opinion on a lot of other industries, that private public partnerships are sort of what's going to get us there the faster and with the best sort of regulations or lack thereof in some cases. But this is, I mean, this is a perfect test case, right? It's something that's extraordinarily expensive that I don't necessarily want my tax dollars going towards, but that I do want the government still to have some interest in, and I know they do. And more and more, I think commercial spaceflight is going to become something that the public is, you know, I think by the time we're all old and sort of in our wheelchairs, our grandkids are going to be like, oh yeah, last weekend when I was in space, I did, you know, this.
Yeah, was at the
I'm hoping, and the only way
Saturday.
we're going to get there is if companies like Google or Apple or whatever else, Virgin, start to put a ton of money into it.
Yeah. Do you guys think that Google and Apple at this point are basically more powerful than the government? Like, they pretty much, they have a shit ton of money. The government seems to be broke. Like, they're building things that are gonna get us to space. Like, it seems to me that if Apple literally, like, if Tim Cook wanted to be president of the United States, I don't think it would be that much of a problem to make that happen.
But I think that's the point. Like, he's not the president, and I don't think his aspirations ever will be. He's a private sector guy through and through, and no one who has spent their life there and then gets into the public sector is like, this was a great idea. I don't think.
But if Steve Jobs was around, don't you think if he had said, all right, I want to be president now, it would have just happened like that? Like, he could have easily been president in 2 years.
I don't think so.
No?
No, I don't think so. I have nothing to back that up. But I
It's
don't
just a
think
gut feeling,
because
okay?
It's just too many flyover states that would be like, I don't trust that guy. You know, too many Republicans and people on the right that would just be like,
states
no.
that can maybe be bought with massive advertising budgets.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of Google leasing that from the government, could they just lease Kansas? You know what I mean? And start some work there. That's
Yeah.
one
All right.
question.
Final thought on this: do we have to get off this mortal coil that we're on? Whenever I do these space exploration things, I always say I'm a big sci-fi guy. All these movies like Avatar and Elysium, all these things where we end up, you know, basically raping the Earth, and we're just gonna mess it up between global warming and overfishing and all that stuff. Are we gonna have to? Is that the next step in evolution of humans that we're gonna have to go? It's sort of like Battlestar Galactica. We were here, we screwed it up, now we're gonna go somewhere else. Like, is that it?
I hope it's not that we have to, but that we want to, and that it's, you know, our intense curiosity that gets us there, and not because we're forced off our planet by it imploding or something crazy.
Yeah.
Because it is within human nature to want to explore and want to go see things that others haven't. So yeah, I hope we do actually finally get some of us off of here.
Yeah. All right,
Some of us.
Yeah, that was a much more pleasant ending than mine. We have to get off here. Maybe we're just going to choose to, and that's what being human is all about. All right, let's move on. So we talk about wealth inequality all the time, and everyone talks about the 1%, that it's about the 1%. But as I've mentioned many times, it really isn't the 1%, because the 1% in America, sometimes, depending on what figures you're looking at, it could be around 300,000 that you're making a year, maybe around 500,000, something like that. Not obscenely rich. So an interesting new study came out at Berkeley University that it really is about the 0.1%. That's the crazy number. So we've got a graph here that's going to explain a little bit more. So right now, in the late 1920s, the bottom 90% held just 16% of America's wealth, considerably less than held by the top 0.1%, which controlled about 25%. So you can see that at the beginning of that chart on the left right there. From the beginning of the Depression until well after the Second World War, the middle class share of the total wealth rose steadily. So the numbers started separating. That was good, great for the middle class, good for the economy. But then those trends have now reversed. And just like the 1920s, the top 0.1% hold 22% of America's wealth, almost the same share as the bottom 90% of the population. And that's what you can see all the way to the right on that they basically have exactly the same amount. The 0.1 percenters, not the 1%ers. The 0.1 percenters have the same amount of wealth as the bottom 90%. By the way, the top 1%, or the top 0.1%, I should say, consists of 160,000 families, and they average worth is about 73 million. So is the 1% thing, it just sounds good, right? Like, is that sort of...
Sounds more romantic.
It just sounds more romantic, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, sometimes you just need like a bumper sticker to get things going, and if they had said, well, it's the 0.1%, that would have confused people. So sometimes you just go, it's the 1%, and that's just enough. Is this partly just messaging?
No, I mean, the 0.1% is astonishing, right? That's to anyone who can do basic math is actually more crazy and more romantic almost. That's like so stark, the inequality.
Oh, that's interesting. So really, by putting it in there, they could have drove the point home even more. Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I'd sort of like to take the opportunity to shout out to my hometown, Seattle, which just raised the minimum wage to 15%.
Yeah.
And having a conversation, $15.
Yeah.
$15.
15% of what? That would be that's true communism.
15% of the salary of the CEO.
Yeah.
No, but
I told you they were trying to get 15% of our income.
I think that's a huge step in the right direction for sort of righting this wrong that exists right now. I mean, anyone who sort of thinks that that's going to be a terrible strategy has a really short-sighted view of how the economy works, and putting money in the pockets of the people who are at sort of the lower end of that graph is really the best sustainable way, because you're going to end up, and you know, they're going to end up contributing to the economy better, and those companies that had to maybe initially lay off some workers because of the minimum wage hike are going to be able to hire them again. Because
yeah. So you're saying you don't believe in trickle-down economics, that if we could just give rich people more money, they'd give more little jobs to the little people?
No.
You just don't buy that?
No, yeah, I think that yeah, no, I can't even make a joke about that, no.
I believe in trickle-down economics, but I believe that everyone should participate in trickle-down economics, not just the 0.1%, you know, yeah.
I don't begrudge these people's success. I really don't. This is what America's all about. I think everyone should have the opportunity to get. But so what do we do? What's like a really, see, every time we talk about this, then everyone just, oh, it's just easy to hate rich people, you know what I mean? It's just so easy to do it. So what is the solution then? Like, should it be like after 50 million, you're taxed at 75%. If you get making 50 million, you're doing pretty well. Now I know in the comments people are gonna be hating me for that even. But like, is there some way to make a tax system that actually is fair? And of course, then they'll send the money to the Cayman Islands and all that. But within a conversation that we can have in 4 minutes, like, is there anything we can do to sort of wrangle this thing in a sensible way?
Well, do you think there should just be a simple tax?
So just like a flat tax for everybody?
Do you think that's how it should be? I don't know.
A flat tax for everyone above 50 million?
Well,
Because the flat tax is definitionally regressive.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I think that it's probably not going to be in the tax system or in the nonprofit system that we figure it out. It really is going to be in legislation that is meant to just compensate people better for the work that they're doing.
But is there any chance that legislation could actually happen? Because aren't these the guys that buy the politicians and money in politics? Like, why would the politicians go against their donors and that whole game that we talk about constantly?
It's also like, why would you participate in the giving pledge then, right? I mean, like, there are people who got there and who recognize that they got there because of, you know, not just sort of ruthless business skill, but also like really hardworking people that they built their company on. And so, and recognize that the inequality is created dramatically by the legislative system, and are sort of the Giving Pledge's attempt to sort of bypass that, I think, as well, through donations to nonprofits or whatever it might be. But no, I think that personally a minimum wage hike is a good first stepping stone, and I think that there's a lot of other really interesting approaches, you know, education and all of that, so that people can feel better about paying a higher minimum wage. But like, I have a question: is there anything that you guys would do for a straight week, actual labor at $15 an hour?
Is there any? I mean, I've done jobs for less than $15 an hour.
But right now in your life, like, as would you, you know, go and not just because you see it as like a vacation from sort of sitting here, but like you could actually see yourself doing for a month or a year. Like, when you put yourself in their shoes, or in the shoes of someone who is working at what used to be an $8 minimum wage that's now $15, it's like, oh yeah, no, like, that's not enough to live on, and that's not a great existence.
Right, so maybe their taxes should be lower. People don't like that argument either. Like, it's a big clusterfuck. Is there anything we can do to get America back on track? Because it seems to me that if I was in the 0.1%, it's in your own vested interest to have the rest of the people happy, because then they don't come at you with pitchforks. But it seems to me we're like just angling this to the pitchfork phase, you know what I mean?
But it's hard to crawl over a gated community carrying a pitchfork. That's the thing, you know what I mean? Like, it's a little difficult.
That is a good point. But they can.
I watched The Purge, and it's possible.
Yeah, there you go. So if you don't want the purge, you should at least think about maybe some ways that we can get those things to separate a little bit. And let's get the middle class back on track. Illegal drugs are insanely, insanely profitable. Yeah, the people over at Information is Beautiful created a graph, a chart to take a look at and show you how much more profitable they are than legal drugs. So let's take a look. Okay, so this is in value per square kilometer. Cocaine, $37,700,000 per square kilometer. That's a lot of money in cocaine. Rice, which is perfectly legal as far as I know, $140,000 per square kilometer. Sugarcane, $262,000. So cocaine, a lot more expensive. Let's scroll down a little bit and see some of the other big ones. Marijuana. We love marijuana on this show. $47,666,000 per kilometer, per square kilometer. Again, a lot of money. What does that compare with? Well, potatoes are only about $365,000. Tobacco, only $277,000. I thought that one was kind of interesting. Opium poppy, again, illegal. A lot of money. Barley is only $36,000. That is a steal for barley, to get a square kilometer of barley. Is anything, before we jump back, is anything jumping out to you here besides that it's pretty obvious what's going on here and war on drugs kind of stuff?
Yes. One, truffles are notably absent.
Yeah, truffles would be bigger than anything, right? Truffles are absurdly, annoyingly, even that truffle oil, you get that?
Like the shaving of, But
That's
also,
a very good point.
I think that the other sort of pattern in here that you see is cocaine, marijuana, and opium all also have medicinal properties, which I think tomatoes and potatoes don't necessarily have.
Tomatoes don't? What about lycopene? They keep telling me about lycopene. Isn't that very good for you?
I've never heard of what that thing is.
You don't know about lycopene?
Nope.
Oh, it's big. It's big in the tomato community. You know about, you're a mother, you must know about lycopene.
I know nothing about it.
You don't know anything about
You're gonna have to
lycopene?
tell us about it after the show.
Yeah, it's supposed to be good. It's in tomatoes. They have it, it says it on the hind thing. Anyway, when you look at that, is that just an obvious example of why the war on drugs was an absolute, abject, utter, give me another adjective, just pure disaster?
When I first saw that chart, I thought to myself, they shouldn't be showing this to farmers. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're doing a disservice on the war on drugs.
Right, because now the barley guy is going to be like, well, I should make a little Coke over here. And,
It's also fascinating, and I'm so interested to see what happens with the marijuana legalization process in this country. Because, you know, if you think about it, in all of US history, there are only 3 mind-altering substances that have ever been legal, right? It's nicotine, caffeine, and alcohol. And think about the size of those markets, and think about the fact that none of those also have medicinal properties the way that marijuana does. And also the fact that, you know, since it's been illegal for all time, essentially, the only people who've made any money in that market are criminals now. And so, like, if you were to actually let real business people into that sort of world, the amount of money that they could make, first of all, once the risk is sort of diminished, is crazy. And the amount, and just the size of the market is ridiculous. As you saw from that, it's illegal, and the size of, you know, the market or the supply and demand is like that. But I'm so fascinated.
So isn't the marijuana thing particularly, shouldn't that be a Republican issue? I did a video on this last week. It seems to me that they want small government, right? So they want the government out of your bedroom, out of your house, out of your living room. So if you want, you could smoke a little weed and watch TV. That's small government, so they should want that. And they also, because they want low taxes, they want to figure out other ways to raise revenue. Well, you could then start taxing the marijuana. So it seems to me the Republicans, if they wanted to be cool, they could actually be cool and keep their principles here, as opposed to just this being a Democratic issue where it's like, we like to get stoned, you know?
The problem isn't like the fiscal conservatives who are Republican because of that. It's the fact that their largest constituency is the religious right as well. And I think it's more sort of a religious hot topic.
So what's the deal with, so they don't want you to get stoned because they don't want you to have a spiritual experience outside of Jesus? Is that?
Wow, I don't. You know, I find
Maybe there's something in the Bible about like don't take mind-altering substances, but then there's wine. Jesus, wine. I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm a Jew. I don't know.
Yeah.
I find the whole thing interesting when I look at it, because when you look at it, it's like when you see for the first time the chart of all the different sizes of stars. And ours is this puny little star, and then you're like, whoa, all this is going on. And I was so surprised that marijuana was the biggest one, given that I always assumed heroin and cocaine cost more than marijuana.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
The demand for them
the
is
demand,
also a lot lower. I mean, every high school kid sort of tries marijuana. Not everyone's getting into heroin.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you say to the people that say, well, if you make marijuana legal, which now DC just voted on it, right? The state of Washington has it, Colorado has it, recreationally, not just medicinally. What would you say to the people that say, well, if you start with marijuana, then it's going to be cocaine and crack, and next thing you know, your kid's going to be on heroin?
Right. I would say if it starts with marijuana, it's most likely going to end with a lot of marijuana. You know what I mean? Very rarely do you kick it on up to the other ones. I mean, people do, but
isn't that the funny thing about marijuana? Like, I used to smoke a lot of pot. I know plenty of people that smoke a lot of pot, and there's something about marijuana. I think George Carlin said something about like this, that people that smoke marijuana eventually usually stop by their own volition without hitting rock bottom or becoming criminals or doing awful things for it. Like, there's something about marijuana that it sort of resolves itself, as opposed to a lot of these other drugs that's usually not the case, right?
Well, the biggest thing for me is like, what are the addictive properties, right? Like, to me, and this is maybe a radical view, like tobacco should be outlawed far earlier than any of these other things because of the capacity to become addicted to it.
Yeah.
Like, it's become chemically modified to be as addictive as possible, whereas it's, you know, only a small portion of the population of smokers of marijuana that can actually become addicted to it. And same with cocaine and all these other things. So like, there's also never been an overdose of marijuana in history. Like, all of these things, when you think about safety, when you think about not just immediate safety, like you could overdose, but also long-term safety, is it going to give you lung cancer or whatever else? Like, tobacco, in terms of the drugs on this list, like, it's the only product on the market that kills 50% of people who use it as directed.
Yeah. So
actually.
final thought. So we need a weed lobby the way we have a tobacco lobby, right? Like, is that really? I mean, and that's already starting to happen. There are now lobbyists in
They're
D.C.
not very organized.
They just don't get out of the house.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, when George Carlin probably said that joke, marijuana was probably a lot less potent. I mean, now marijuana is so potent, I can't abide by that completely, you know.
Fair enough. So Qatar or Qatar, we debated which one. It depends. I hear on cable news all the time, they pronounce it every which way. Qatar or Qatar. I say Qatar, you say Qatar. That country over there, so they're getting the World Cup in 2022. That's what it sounds like, at least at the moment. Now, a lot of people are fighting against that. There's all kinds of reasons, because it's going to be hot as hell there. They're also funding a lot of terror all over the Middle East and the world. Some big problems there. But then an interesting piece came out in The Guardian that they basically are using slave labor from North Korea, pretty much indentured servants, to build the actual stadium. So we've got some more info for you. According to the testimonies from workers, laborers said that they receive almost no salaries in person during the 3 years that they typically spend there. So they're sending people from North Korea. They spend 3 years, basically get no pay. The expectation is that they will collect their earnings when they return to North Korea, but workers receive as little as 10% of their salaries when they go home, and some may receive nothing at all. The workers essentially are there to earn foreign currency for North Korea. So this is pretty terrible stuff. And you know, all these things, when we have Olympics in different places and World Cup and all that, we hear all this stuff about all these people literally getting killed. There's been many, many people that have already been killed while building this thing. They have no rights and protections and anything like that. Does this surprise you in any way? Like, I feel like people just don't really care about this stuff because it always happens.
Right, it doesn't surprise me at all. And by the way, for a North Korean to look around and go, this is some slave labor bullshit, it's got to be pretty friggin' bad, you know?
Yeah.
It's got to be pretty bad, but it doesn't surprise me.
I saw you nodding along. This definitely doesn't surprise you.
No, well, Kim Jong-un being a dick doesn't surprise, I don't think, anyone at this point. But you know, this is actually a Qatar issue, like, and an international community issue. Anyone who's a World Cup fan, like, this is an instance where we actually probably have some power in the situation to really shine a spotlight on the authorities in Qatar so hard that they can't hide from it, and they actually have to address it, right? And
so what could we actually do?
Well, there's, you know, they mentioned an organization in that article. I think it's the Anti-Slavery International. They're like a 175-year-old organization that's working on shining that spotlight, and just through social media, through support of those organizations that are pushing forward anti-slavery efforts, we can potentially ensure that they're no longer enslaved in Qatar. We can't really do anything about the North Korean slavery, but at least they're home.
Is the bigger problem here that people just love these events? So no matter what happens, you know, there have been stories even this past summer about that in Brazil, people were getting displaced and they were just removing all these low income houses. They were just literally just making people homeless to build the stadium and to build concession stands. Like, there's something about sports and this national pride thing that it supersedes any kind of human right thing, right?
Right. I think it's obviously it's a terrible thing, and I think any country that treats their women as second-class citizens, it's no surprise that they're going to treat foreigners as second-class citizens, which they do. But I also think it becomes a fine line of, here we are having so much aggression towards the Middle East, some of it warranted, some of it maybe not, but we have a situation where we can involve them into a world organization and a world pastime. And so it's a hard thing to say, do we not go there now at all? Or do we take the good with the bad and say, you know what, we want them to participate? Because you can't just keep pushing those kind of countries to the side. They have to participate. And maybe part of the participation also comes with people standing up from the other countries, like the United States and like England, and saying, you have to take some responsibility for what is going on here.
Yeah, so I mention that all the time. Every time we talk about gay rights in that part of the world, every time we talk about women's rights in that part of the world, all basically human rights, minority rights, all of that. They really have none of that in that part of the world. And yet we still grant them the ability to host these things. Women in Saudi Arabia still can't drive. Now it sounds like maybe they'll be able to drive to vote. Like, it's just such a mess. So what are we supposed to do?
Well, I sort of agree with Felicia. I mean, I think that by potentially hosting the World Cup here, it's putting them on the international stage, right? And it's giving other countries an opportunity to learn more about this country on the other side of the world that they may have no idea about, and to travel there in some cases. And I think that it's only through that sort of interconnectivity that you can even sort of begin to address some of these inequality issues. And by, by meeting these people, by learning more of their customs, or just learning more in general. And I'm sort of pro doing more of this sort of development stuff in those countries.
Yeah,
because of that.
I like the idea. I just don't know. I mean, look at Russia. Like, we gave them the Olympics, and then it looks like things got a hell of a lot worse, or at least according to the people in Crimea, I suppose.
Right. Well, I think what should happen is the people that are actually going to go to that event should bring their wives and their rowdy cousins that are chicks, and just get their drink on, and
then everything.
then show the women there, look what we got. You know what I mean?
I think you're making a breast joke, and let's finish up with breasts. Insta breasts, they're coming, people. What are they? Take a look.
Women looking for a bigger bust can now go up a full cup size.
The effect is pretty much instantaneous.
Just one catch, it lasts just 24 hours. Katie has a big date tonight, her 1-year anniversary with her boyfriend.
I will have a surprise for him.
New York cosmetic surgeon Dr. Norman Rowe says women like Katie come in when they have a special event where they want to look great. But most other patients come in when they just want to try out what they'll look like with permanent implants. It didn't take long, an injection of a bag of saline, and less than half an hour, voila.
I love that. I will have a surprise for him, which basically means, like, if I sleep with him and we wake up the next morning, my tits are going to be a lot smaller than they were last night. All right, so there's another surgeon now working on something that's going to last 2 or 3 weeks. So this would be like vacation breasts, not just the one-night breasts. Insta breast. Do you want the Insta breast? Do you have the Insta breast? I guess I should ask.
I don't want the vacation breast, but I would like the long weekend vagina. You know what I mean? I mean, that is just so ridiculous, you know?
That's funny.
I want my leave of absent booty, you know what I mean? I think that's so crazy. If anyone's gonna jab a needle into my chest, it's to awaken me from a heroin overdose. I mean, the whole idea is just crazy, because it's not just they put a needle here. I can't assume it is. They put a needle here and it fills up the whole breast. That means they gotta put needles all over your boobs, you know? It just seems like the most ridiculous idea on the planet.
Okay, so we know that, look, we're in Los Angeles here. I walk around all the time in constant amazement of the ridiculous plastic surgery that people have. Women, of course, but now I'm seeing a ton of it with men. Temporary, maybe it's a little better, like you need like a little boost on a given evening, maybe there's something. I'm trying to give these guys the benefit of the doubt here.
Geez, every time you get it done and you go to the bathroom, you go from a C cup to a B cup, I mean.
Yeah.
I think this is so interesting, and I mean, I grew up in Seattle, hippie parents, like that whole world, and completely, thought never would I ever get a spray tan. That's happened. Never would I ever get plastic surgery. That hasn't happened. But like, I guarantee every sort of small boobed woman out there has at one point maybe Googled like natural breast enhancement or like boob augmentation, whatever that is. And most of them end up getting scared away from it or not really willing to accept the risks with it. And so like assuming, which is probably not a great assumption, that this is totally safe, this temporary thing, I think that it's actually a really interesting sort of like training wheels for plastic surgery. And I think that most small boobed girls, if they were to get it to say, oh, do I maybe want permanent breast enhancement, would experience it for a couple weeks and be like, that was fun, and then go back. Because honestly, like when you don't have to wear a bra all the time, it's worry about the effects of gravity as much, like I think it's a better life. So I think there's gonna be like a grass is greener moment that happens with a lot of these women. They'll end up not going through with it.
Yeah, all right. I did not think of that. I actually think that's kind of interesting, like a little test run, and then you can decide if you want to go forward, or perhaps you decide you don't. We just have insane image problems, right? Because even the idea of the 2-3 week thing, the 24-hour one, it's for a date, as that girl was going on. But even that, you're selling false goods. Like, isn't that a problem? Like, of course, we all sell false goods all the time. You go on a date, women puts on all kinds of makeup, the guy might shave, or, like we all do that. But is there some risk in that we're all selling something that is not real?
Absolutely, and that it's geared specifically towards women. Although they do say that they can inject it into a man's calves to make their calves look attractive.
Because women,
something else.
Yeah, I know.
There was a C word there.
I know, which is code for penis, I think, for young people.
Right.
And a man would never put that in his penis because women would be like, you taste salty enough. Anyway, because it's made from saline. They won't even say what's in the 2 or 3 week product.
Yeah.
And it's like, look, this is going into women's bodies. It's not the secret recipe for Coca-Cola. You know what I mean?
Man,
like,
that stuff's pretty
that's
toxic,
pretty
though.
crazy. Yeah.
Allow me to quote Beyonce here, because
Please
my
do.
producer did a fine job and gave me a Beyonce quote. Is it our souls that need surgery, not our bodies? Apparently Beyonce said that. You know about this Beyonce? She's married to Jay-Z. You know about Beyonce, right?
Oh, rings a bell.
Yeah. But is it our souls? Like, are we rotting on the inside while we do all this stuff on the outside? And now we're doing it temporarily to fake it. You go on vacation and you feel better on the beach, and then you come home back to your regular life and your regular boobs, and you're screwed.
Geez, if someone could surgically improve my soul, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? That would be absolutely amazing.
Getting really deep on the show here.
I know.
Yeah, we're finishing up deep.
I mean, I think it's, looking at if everyone's end goal is happiness, what are the means to that end? And some people make the assumption that it is money or that it is changing your physical appearance. And I think there's definitely something to be said for wondering what it would be like to be in another person's body for a minute or for a lifetime or whatever that is. And chances that you have to temporarily experience that, whether it's by augmenting your physical appearance or just putting yourself in someone's shoes, going and volunteering, going and experiencing life in a different country, anything that sort of changes your perspective temporarily on your own situation and puts into perspective your problems and is going to be great. And that's all, maybe go volunteer instead of getting a boob job, but like.
Yeah.
But that's the use of having an amazing, creative imagination. You know what I mean? By wanting to experience how other people live their lives by basically fix a flat can up to your breast. I don't know, you know.
All right, well, I'm with Molly. The meaning of life is trying to get some happiness. I hope you've gotten a little happiness while watching this. And maybe if you get the breasts, let us know. You can comment right down below. Of course, don't forget to subscribe, and we will do this again next week.